night, but I don't think anybody can breathe a sigh of relief until the ink is dry on that bill, which hasn't even been passed yet from Congress.
Yeah, a little love is in the air here in Washington. Mitch McConnell saying that the president has agreed to sign on to this bill. It's not perfect. It doesn't have everything he wants, but he'll sign that and then he'll declare a national emergency, according to McConnell, and that will allow the president to kind of get that supplemental funding he wants through the military and bypass Congress to get the rest.
So let's take a big step back and take a look at what Congress is poised to pass today, we understand, to keep the government running and to defend the border, which has been such a contentious issue. 1,100-page bill dropped late overnight. These are some of the terms that those bipartisan negotiators agreed to. We know that the president is the only sticking point left. Both sides in Congress have signed off on, as you see here, more detention beds, more funding for ICE. There's that key money, $1.4 billion for border fencing, which would construct 55 miles of barrier. And obviously, they're adding some new technology, humanitarian aid as part of this package. We had heard, Jordan, over the past few days of some potential sticking points. The president talked about them as potentially landmines. He is really the one that is holding this whole thing up. He has kept his cards close to his vest, which led to a sort of interesting moment this morning on the Senate floor with the Republican from Iowa, a friend of the president, Chuck Grassley, just after morning prayers, had this to say. Take a listen.
Our Lord, amen.
Amen. Let's all pray that the president will have wisdom to sign the bill so government doesn't shut down.
A little bit of an impromptu prayer there from the Iowa Republican. It does appear, at least right now, that the president is inclined to sign the bill. We'll talk a little bit more coming up about what that means and what else he's talking about doing. But right now, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is addressing these breaking developments. Let's listen into what she has to say.
Joneses, and certainly Walter Jones and John Dingell. Today is also a day of sadness because it marks the one-year anniversary of the Parkland tragedy of gun violence. 1 year ago, America's heart was broken by the horrific act of violence in Parkland, Florida. Today, we remember this.
All right, and it does seem that the speaker is talking about some other things today, which we'll have coming up in the show. We'll monitor her press conference there, see if she has any comments on these breaking developments. Jordan, let's take a listen to what the Republican Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, just had to say about what is happening right now. Take a listen to Mitch McConnell.
I had an opportunity to speak with President Trump, and he, I would say to all my colleagues, has indicated he's prepared to sign the bill. He will also be issuing a national emergency declaration at the same time. And I've indicated to him that I'm going to support the national emergency declaration. So for all of my colleagues, the president will sign the bill. We'll be voting on it shortly.
There's a major development happening just now on this Valentine's Day. The president will sign the bill. He'll also do something, Jordan, that you've done a lot of reporting on, declare a national emergency at the southern border. What does that mean?
It means that the president will find that extra funding through the military. So he will bypass Congress altogether. Now, Devin, we should note that this is all but certain to get legal challenges. The Democrats are going to do everything they can to fight this. So it's not clear that even though he's declaring this national emergency, it will be allowed to go forward. But that's the action he's attempting to take.
And I think we have a look at what the National Emergencies Act does. It's a bill that was, of course, dates back to 1976. Many presidents have declared national emergencies. In fact, 31 are still in effect right now. But as Jordan was saying, it will allow some flexibility. Congress usually appropriates the money, but in an emergency, presidents technically can do some shifting of those funds. It's going to draw challenges here, Jordan, because, of course, part of this debate is there really an emergency at the southern border?
That's exactly right. We have seen national emergencies declared in the past, but not for something quite like this. So it's really testing his presidential authority here.
And let's go to the Pentagon now, where Elizabeth McLaughlin has been reporting on this from the military angle. Elizabeth, I know that you've kind of looked at the budgets. You've poured over the numbers. We know from your reporting that the president had asked the military brass to come back to him with estimates. What do we know about what cash could be available to him, and what would the trade-offs be?
Yeah, Devin, so there are going to be a couple of different options here, and we know that they first started looking at this back in early January during the first national emergency. So if he declares a national emergency, he's going to have to specify which title of the U.S. code that he wants to invoke, and that'll determine where the funding largely comes from. So if this is Title 10, that's going to use military construction funding. If it's Title 33, that could be using funds that are used by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's when you heard the debate about whether he would pull some of the funding that has been set aside for hurricane relief in places like Puerto Rico and Texas. So that's what's really going to be the most important distinction here. And if he uses that military construction fund, Title 10, that could be, maybe $13 billion, but only $2 billion could be available. It's still very unclear how much money is unobligated and how much he can pull. And so that's what we're going to be looking for when he declares that national emergency.
And we're just getting word from the White House. Jordan Phelps has it for us here. The president's spokeswoman, Sarah Sanders, is now weighing in as well on this news.
She's saying President Trump will sign the government funding bill, and as he has stated before, he will also take other executive action, including a national emergency, to ensure we stop the national security and humanitarian crisis at the border.
All right, so she's confirming what we heard from Mitch McConnell. Let's go up to the Hill now, where our Ben Siegel has been tracking the political reaction of this today. And Ben, I'm struck by the fact that so many Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, have been big opponents of a national emergency because they're afraid of the precedent this would set if a Democrat was in the White House.
That's right. Some, but not all Republicans, I should say. I actually, about 5 minutes ago, ran into John Cornyn, one of the top Republicans in the Senate from Texas. He's up for re-election in 2 years, and he was very noncommittal when I asked him if he supported this move by the president as outlined by Mitch McConnell. He says he has to learn the details about what happens because, as Elizabeth was pointing out, there are lots of trade-offs here and equities to weigh. Eminent domain is something that's very controversial among the ranchers on the border in Texas, his home state, and there's also disaster relief money that went to his home state, and construction for military projects, things like homes for military families and other base refurbishments that would be taken away from if you put money towards the wall. So lots of trade-offs here, and many members of Congress are going to be looking at the fine print of what comes out of the White House.
And Ben, real quick, you were also tracking some efforts today to possibly preempt the president on some of these things, particularly over eminent domain. Democrats, border state representatives afraid that their constituents could see their land seized to build this wall. What sort of efforts are afoot to protect that?
That's right. There's no question that this is where the fight is moving now on Capitol Hill, now that the president has shown he's determined to make this move. Democrats in the House have already put forward several bills that would limit the administration's authority to use certain executive powers, and it would also give more money to landowners who are trying to fight any sort of eminent domain process in court. It's not clear if the Senate would even pass these bills, but it shows that the battle is now moving to how to contest this executive action.
All right, Ben Siegel for us on the Hill. Thanks so much. And real quickly with Elizabeth back at the Pentagon. Elizabeth, remind us also there are so many troops, American troops deployed down at the border, including now Adam Kinzinger, congressman, Republican congressman, headed that way to join as well. He's a National Guard member. Remind us how many troops are there? Could we potentially see more troops going to join this effort?
Well, it was just a few weeks ago that they sent thousands of more troops back down there and extended the border mission through the end of the fiscal year, so through the end of September. It looks like the troop numbers will settle at about over 4,000 active duty service members. And then just as you mentioned, there is a National Guard presence there as well that's been there since last April, and that's about 2,300 people.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that reporting at the Pentagon. Got to interrupt you there. Let's go back to Nancy Pelosi, who's weighing in now on this news.
But it's important to note that when the president declares this emergency, first of all, it's not an emergency, what's happening at the border. It's a humanitarian challenge to us. The president has tried to sell a bill of goods to American people. But putting that aside, just in terms of the president making an end run around Congress, here he said, let us respect what the committee will do, and then walks away from it. But in any event, the president is doing an end run about Congress, about the power of the purse. You've heard me say over and over again, Article 1, the legislative branch, the power of the purse, the power to declare war, many other powers listed in the Constitution, and of course, the responsibility to have oversight. So the president is doing an end run around that. We will review our options. We'll be prepared to respond appropriately to it. I know the Republicans have some unease about it no matter what they say, because if the president can declare an emergency on something that he has created as an emergency, an illusion that he wants to convey, just think of what a president with different values can present to the American people. You want to talk about a national emergency? Let's talk about today.
All right, and that's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi talking about challenging, Jordan, the president's move here. We've heard from so many Democrats in the past few days. They are looking at all their legal options. We could potentially see the House of Representatives, led by Democrats now, sue the president in court over this.
Absolutely. Pelosi is saying it is not an emergency, as the president claims that it is. She's saying he's trying to do an end run around Congress, and they're not going to let him do it.
All right, one of the people that will be leading a legal, facing a legal contest from Democrats if this gets to court would be the new Attorney General. Let's bring in our Justice reporter, Jack Date. Great to see you, Jack. Another big day on Capitol Hill. And we also have a new Attorney General, a new man overseeing the Russia investigation, just as this seems to be coming to a head. We think it's winding down. So let's remind everybody who was confirmed today, who is Bill Barr, and what's his first task going to be when he takes over the Justice Department.
So William Barr, of course, is somebody who's had the job before. He served as Attorney General for George Herbert Walker Bush back in the first Bush administration, so he knows the Justice Department. He's somebody who really understands the institution, is an institutionalist. But of course, his first task is going to be dealing with this Mueller report. He's going to get the confidential report from Bob Mueller. What he does with it next is a real mystery. Now, what he's indicated in his testimony is that he's going to follow the regulations, he's going to follow the law, and he's going to follow Justice Department guidelines, which gives some insight into we may see just sort of what we know already publicly, but we might not see anything about people who haven't been charged, up to and including the president.
So just to take a step back, this is the guy who's going to decide how much of the Mueller investigation you're going to get to know, we're going to get to know. And isn't it also seen as an indication, now that he's been confirmed, this is really sort of has everybody's radars up, because one of the sort of indicators that we could be finally, after 2 years, coming to an end of the Mueller investigation was the new Attorney General.
Exactly. So his day has come. He's going to be in the job. He'll be walking through the halls.
So we're in the hot zone for the report to come down.
Exactly. We are very much in the hot zone, and we can anticipate over the next couple weeks, things are only going to get hotter with each passing day.
But of course, Jack, that doesn't necessarily mean this report's going to become public, right?
That's exactly right. The report, under the regulations, Mueller's only obligated to provide a confidential report to Barr, to the new Attorney General. So what he does with it is a real mystery at this point. And so it's going to be largely up to him. Now, the regulations also allow, if it's in the public interest, he can release the whole thing. But
so he has a lot of power to decide what we're going to see.
Latitude.
Meanwhile, the White House, Jordan, is firing missiles today, it seems like, at the former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, someone who has been at the center of this investigation, the Russia probe. He was fired at the urging of President Trump late last year. And now Andrew McCabe is speaking out for the first time.
Speaking out, and the president is not happy about it. Sarah Sanders is not happy about it. He's tweeting, Sarah Sanders putting out a statement saying that he essentially went into an investigation that was unfounded. Of course, there's a congressional investigation, a Mueller probe that would beg to differ with that being unfounded, but the White House is not too pleased.
Fascinating figure, Jack. Andrew McCabe, someone helped initiate the investigation into President Trump. He's out with a new book. He's out with a big interview. Some of that has come out. What are you learning about Andrew McCabe we didn't know before?
Well, it's interesting. You know, some of the things that we've seen so far from the interview that aired, some excerpts of it aired on CBS. We'll, of course, have them on The View next week. But we're learning a little more detail about some of the things that we previously reported on, like his meeting in the days after the firing of James Comey with the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and the idea that there was discussions of the 25th Amendment of removing the president, of things like Rosenstein wearing a wire. Now, the Justice Department has maintained that, you know, if those discussions occurred, they were only in jest, and nobody ever took them seriously. But clearly, Andrew McCabe did. And he's not getting any Valentines from the White House today.
Good reference to this day. Jack Date, our Justice reporter, thank you so much, sir. On this day 756 of the Trump administration, we are taking a big step toward a conclusion of that investigation. Thank you so much, Jack. Moving on now to some big news out of New York City today with a political bent to it. Amazon, the mega company here in the United States, shipper, online retail giant, deciding, Jordan, they are pulling out of New York City after that hotly contested national contest of where they would create thousands of jobs, set up shop. They've now backed out in large part because of opposition from just a handful of New York City politicians.
Yeah, some of the local politicians not necessarily pleased with how Amazon runs its company and maybe wanting a little more oversight into their business than Amazon wanted to have. So.
And our Stephanie Ramos is there in New York City right now, where the reaction is continuing to pour out. Stephanie, we've heard from Amazon; they're disappointed. We've heard from New York City's mayor, who says, "Look, New York City's a tough place. You got to be ready to fight in the game." What are you hearing from folks out there on the streets?
Absolutely, Devin. Well, many different opinions out here in Queens over Amazon's decision to not build here. You'll remember it was just this past November, after a year-long search, when Amazon announced it'd be building its headquarters in Northern Virginia, not far from where you are, and here in New York City's Long Island City, both locations set to receive a $2.5 billion investment, and the company promising at least 25,000 workers would have been hired. And New York's Governor Cuomo saying that the company would have produced $30 billion in revenue for the state. So here in this area, we've spoken to a couple of people who are not happy with the decision, and there are, of course, opponents in the area as well. But the company, Amazon, backing out, saying it is not going to build here its HQ2 after some backlash from some people in the community, city and state politicians, opponents who are actually just wrapping up here. They were holding up some signs earlier saying that Amazon causes homelessness and causes family separations, many of them questioning why Amazon deserves $3 billion in tax subsidies. A lot of them also questioning the commitment to union labor and Amazon's environmental protection and its commitment to immigrant workers. So we also spoke with someone, a Long Island City business owner, who's not happy about this decision at all. He says having Amazon here would have transformed not only this area, but Queens as a whole and New York City. Take a listen.
So you came out here because you heard the news?
I came out here because I'm here all the time. Because this is my street. This isn't his street. His street is, he wants to be in the mayor's office. That's the street he wants to be on. Exactly. If you guys want to have an actual honest way of looking at this, instead of having his little press conferences at this little fancy park here, go down to the actual site and see what basically we're left with now. Look, I mean, just turn your cameras that way to the Ryder truck parking lot, the bombed out cars in our neighborhood. This is not Shangri-La over here. We needed this over here. We needed this. But this guy, he wants to like basically be everybody's best friend on the progressive side of things. Like, I want the national health care, I want all that stuff too, but I'd like help paying for it. But apparently I have to do it myself now, according to this guy. So, I mean, I'm not pleased with this.
And we spoke with Josh just a little while ago. He's got a barbecue place just down the street. You can hear how passionate he is about this decision, not happy with it at all. And he says, you know, they're obviously going to have to move on, but Amazon's decision comes after weeks of meetings with city and state officials. No resolution. Amazon saying they're out. Devin.
Hey, Stephanie Ramos for us. Thank you so much. Out there, we're seeing the statement here from Amazon about their decision to pull out of Long Island City, Queens, and Jordan. Obviously, some very, very passionate opinions there about this company. And that gentleman was referring to, that resident business owner was referring to a local city councilman that had been leading the charge against Amazon. There's I don't think there's much they can do now to woo them back, so
no,
a lot of disappointment.
There isn't, but silver lining, another city out there can maybe be wooed.
That's right. Thousands of jobs on the way. Finally today, we end on a more thoughtful and reflective note. This one-year anniversary after that Parkland, Florida high school shooting, the deadliest high school shooting in American history. 17 students killed. There are a lot of remembrances taking place today around the country. We see some pictures there, a peace symbol at one gathering. There have been moments of silence here as well. And those Parkland students who rose from that tragedy to lead a national campaign for school safety, gun violence prevention, have gone dark today in remembrance of their former classmates. We got a chance just a week or so ago to catch up with two Parkland, Florida students, Matt Deitch and Charlie Mursky, to ask them what they're thinking about on this one-year anniversary. Take a listen. Any reflections as we're coming up on the one-year mark?
The hardest part to believe is that it's only been a year. We've been working. I went straight from a friend's funeral to a living room floor to organize the march. And that I haven't stopped working since, right? We haven't stopped working since, and young people around the country haven't stopped working since. And so the fact that it's been a year is remarkable in the way that we have been able to accomplish so much and save so many lives in a range of states by passing over 80 different laws and mobilizing more young people than ever before to say that this issue matters to us. Because if we're not talking about this, if we're not talking about the problem, then we can't solve it, right? And it's really hard to feel like it's been a year, because sometimes it feels like a week, sometimes it feels like a decade, and all I want to do every single day is continue the work so that I can honor those that we lose every single day.
Is it going to be tough on the 14th?
I think it's going to be, everyone's just going to have to be careful. It's just about, making sure the families have what they need, the support they need, and then at the same time trying to make sure that these issues still persist and that we need to fight for all those families and the thousands of families each year that lose family members to gun violence.
All right, and our thanks to Matt Deitch and Charlie Mirsky. We talked to them as they were testifying before the House Judiciary Committee on the first gun violence hearing in 8 years, Jordan. That bill passed out of committee last night on the anniversary. And so there's so much celebration of the progress that's been made in this conversation. One area of disappointment has been with the president. Despite all those listening sessions, there has sort of been a fading of his involvement on this issue, even as sort of a mouthpiece to get something done.
That's right. The president put out a statement today celebrating the tremendous strides that have been made on this issue. But Devin, plenty of gun advocates would say that that is just not the case. Some of the president's most dramatic proposals he supported last year have since fallen to the wayside. He called for, at the time, raising the age limit for buying all guns. He even called for arming teachers. That was a really controversial proposal. Those have just gone dark, Devin.
And, of course, the president did not make any mention of Parkland in the State of the Union address 2 weeks ago either, or gun violence or his proposals. Jordan, thanks for that note. One group of people has not forgotten, though, the tragedy at Parkland High School, and that is other teen journalists all around the country that have banded together for a really unique project that has been unveiled on this one-year anniversary. It's called Since Parkland, sinceparkland.org. They've documented the astonishing number of children and teenagers killed in the past year in America because of gun violence, not just at schools, but in a wide variety of cases. And we're joined now by one of those journalists from Glencoe, Illinois, Madison Hahami. She's an 18-year-old student at the Illinois Math and Science Academy, also the co-editor-in-chief of her school's newspaper, The Acronym. Madison, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us today here in the briefing room via Skype. Talk to us about the project. What impact has it had on you personally, and what did you learn from it?
So I initially joined the project because I live, as you said, in Glencoe, Illinois. It's a very generally sheltered area, and even though I'm very close to areas of Chicago where there is known to be a lot of gun violence, I had never experienced that myself. So I felt very isolated from my community. And so the opportunity to do a project like this that would be able to connect me to Chicago as a whole and just to other teens as a whole was something that was really appealing to me. And I actually learned a week ago after doing the project for a little while that I had a relative who was shot in 1992 when he was in Atlanta for a program to try to connect him more to his African-American roots. And a friend wrote a commentary in the Los Angeles Times about the shooting, and she said that we need to start speaking up, and us teenagers need to be a part of the conversation because we don't want more kids to die tomorrow. And more kids did die the day after that, the day after that, and the day after that, and years and decades after that, and kids are still dying today. And so even though I don't think I knew it at the time, I think that the main thing that I wanted to do with this project is to just be a part of that conversation and to try to use my words and the power of my writing, try to make the story something more accessible, something more human, so people would see that kids are dying, and even if it's not always reported on the news, that it's a really big problem, and that's something we need to look at it, and we need to really try to figure out what we can do.
Now, Madison, you wanted to get involved in this as a way to connect with your community, you say, but how do you feel at your school? Do you feel like there is adequate school safety?
I think that my school, I think so, yeah. I think that for me, it's just more of just like a personal thing, just going to school every day and knowing that these things are happening. And I don't even know if it's just on a policy level. I think it's just more on a personal level, just not wanting to have that feeling every single day. And I think with this project, sorry.
No, absolutely a powerful project, for sure. I was really struck by it. And you personally, Madison, wrote 36, by my count, profiles of teenagers who were killed in the past year. What impact did that have on you personally? That must have been very difficult to write those. We can see them on your page here.
It was really difficult. I remember one of the kids that I wrote about was named Tariq Morris, and he was shot and killed. He was 3 months old, and I hadn't realized at the time, I only realized afterwards, that he was not only the youngest child that I had written about, but he was the youngest child to have died the entire year due to gun violence. And I remember just looking at his smile and just looking at his laugh and thinking, he's never gonna have that experience again. I remember there was another girl named Addison Sanders who was 10 years old who lived in Chicago, and I saw pictures of her, and she had this like crazy curly hair, and it looked like my hair when I was 10 years old. And I kept thinking to myself, I was wondering, is her hair gonna look like mine when she gets older? Is it gonna stay that curly? And it's like the really mundane questions like that, like, what kind of clothes are they gonna want to wear when they're older? What kind of sports are they gonna want to do? Like, it's the little details that were just as poignant to me as just like the bigger picture. Like, there's so much just that we will never know about what these kids could have accomplished and what they could have been. And the loss in that sense is just inexplicable.
Totally inexplicable. Madison Hahami of Glencoe, Illinois, hats off to you and your fellow teen journalists for highlighting so many Americans' lives lost in the past year due to gun violence. It's sinceparkland.org. It's a fantastic website. Go check it out. A great tribute to those people. Also a reminder of how much work we have left to do. Thank you, Madison, for that. Before we end the show today, just some breaking news in from the White House. We talked earlier in the show about potential legal challenges, Jordan, to the president's coming declaration of an emergency order for the southern border. Sarah Sanders now responding to that, saying the White House is prepared to tackle and address any legal challenges, but she said there shouldn't be because Congress should be doing their job.
No surprise there, but that's not surprising to see Sarah fighting back. They were obviously prepared for this.
They spent a lot of time thinking about this, for sure. On a lighter note today, we leave you with a little bit of Valentine's Day political fun. We know that many of you are political junkies. Perhaps it has spilled into your love life. Our Ellie Smith caught up with Melissa Hobley from OkCupid, the online dating site, a little bit earlier today, who told us how politics these days is having a big impact on millennials and their pursuit of love. Take a look.
So one of the things we find fascinating at OkCupid is the role that politics is playing in dating for millennials specifically. So we've been around several years, so we followed the importance that politics has played even before you get to the match, right? And what we've noticed is for millennials, millennial women in particular, politics has never mattered more than it does now. There's been 1,000% increase, for example, on political terms on your profile. What we think is happening is we're in a very hot political time where the stakes feel very high. And what we've noticed is if you're a millennial, if you're in your 20s, you're going to use dating to show how you feel and also to signal what matters to you.
Birds of a feather flock together, I guess, in the world of politics and love.
I mean, I would say it would make for a great conversation to sit down with someone of the other party.
I know. Why we don't want cookie cutters of ourselves. We want good conversation in relationships. We'll see. Hope you have a good Valentine's Day. Thanks for joining us here in the briefing room on ABC News Live. This show will run again 5:30 Eastern Time. We hope you join us back here tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time. Great to have Jordan Phelps with us. I'm Devin Dwyer. We'll see you next time.